Hello, everyone. It's Amanda with Content Marketing Institute. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Ask the CMWorld Community live stream. You can find us here pretty much every Monday at noon. We've taken the last couple Mondays off, but we're back here. And we have such a great community of influencers and experts, and we want to share their experience and insight with you. So that's why we ask you to join us every Monday. And if you don't know what Content Marketing Institute is, we are the leading training and education organization for all things content marketing. We have a great signature event that's coming up in September called Content Marketing World. And we'd love for you to join us there. It's September 28th through October 1st. And you can find more, including how to register at contentmarketingworld.com. And if you are joining us today, as always, you know that I'm going to say, I love it when you drop me a line and say hello and let me know where you are joining us from. James, hello. Thomas, Christoph, great to see you. Christoph is an expert at live streaming, so thanks for joining us. Pierre, Karina from India, thank you for joining us, everyone. Good to see you all here today. So today we are talking about brand voice. Does your brand have a clear brand voice? What kind of impression do you make when someone meets your brand online? And once you've built that audience, do you have a voice that's recognizable? They know it's actually you. With so much content out there, you've got to make your time with the audience count. And that's what we are going to talk to today. We're going to talk about how to get better at reaching and understanding your customers so you can be memorable and engaging with them online. So again, let us know if you're joining us. Drop us a line, John, Linda. Someone's joining us from Dubai and Florida, Orlando. It's good to see you all today. And I didn't really have a question of the day, but I guess I'm kind of curious if you let me know if you guys have brand voice guidelines that you already have. You have these conversations. I hope people are having these conversations about their brand voice. So let me get to today's guest. She's a digital marketing strategist, a trainer, a public speaker. She's an in-house marketer. She's worked with companies such as LG Electronics, Dell, and Razer. She's now an independent consultant who helps brands build meaningful relationships and scale them through digital channels. So welcome to Vassilena Valchanova. Hello. Oops, let me get you back up here. There we go. Hello. Welcome.
Hey, Amanda. Hey.
You're joining us from Bulgaria, correct?
Exactly, yes.
We have people from all over.
Much less sunny and warm than people would expect usually when I talk to people. They have this vision, but still very happy to join you today.
Oh, great. So it's not sunny right now, is what you're saying?
Not really, no. It's much more like what you would associate with London weather. But I guess that Europe being so small and intertwined, the weather got mixed up and didn't decide to shine fully today.
Great. We have Alicia from Boston, Jim from Texas. We have people from Sweden. So we have people from Australia, Finland. So everybody is joining us from all over today. So let's get right to it. Why do you need to define a brand voice?
So the way this usually happens, at least for the brands that I work with, because I'm currently working with a lot of brands that are young, that are currently in development even, or still not launched. And at that stage, when you're early on in your brand journey, let's say, what usually happens is that there's one person whose primary job is to communicate across all of the channels that the brand is present on and create most of the content, if not all, or at least be highly involved in creating that content. And in this situation, it's easy to keep the voice consistent just by virtue of there being only one person who's doing most of the communication from the brand's perspective. But as brands grow, what we see is that this brand voice, it becomes much more lackluster or very disparate. Like you clearly see that there are different people behind the scenes who are communicating from the brand account, and that's not something that creates a great customer experience or that builds the brand equity in a meaningful and sustainable way. So the reason I think that brand voice is something important, something that people should focus on is, first off, there's differentiation. So you need to make sure that your brand is different from what people are used to with some of your competitors. And on the other hand, it's clear enough when you see some piece of communication that this is coming from you, this is coming from your brand as opposed to anyone else. And I heard that great expression in a discussion led by Anne Handley a couple of months back. I'm currently blanking on the speaker's name, but what they said was essentially, if the label comes off or if the logo gets cut out from a piece of communication, will people still know that this is your brand? And that's where it comes, like that's where brand voice plays a major role.
Right, exactly. So how do you do it? You know, what steps do you need to take to, I guess, define your brand voice, and who should be involved? Just marketing, editorial, the C-suite, like who needs to be involved in all that as well?
Well, generally, well, at least from my experience and what I've seen with companies, is that this is a marketing-led initiative, and marketing gets to do the brunt of the work, but it's not something that is done solely by the marketing team. You need to involve a lot of different people. So there are a few different stages in defining brand voice. And the first one, this is where the marketing team can really go in full swing. And this is the initial audit and initial research. So usually most of the marketers would find themselves in a situation where there's already some communication coming out of the brand that's established. And in this case, the best way you can go about it is check out your existing communication and see how your brand is already communicating and what you can keep from this communication style. So this can be going through existing blog content or social media content or wherever your brand's present, really. It can even go through internal company research. So how people are communicating in a more organic manner all throughout the organization. This can be a great source of inspiration, because what usually happens is that the brand voice needs to reflect the company culture. And if your team is super informal and friendly in internal comms, but your brand needs to be very serious and conservative looking on the outside, there's usually, it makes it that much harder to sustain in the long run. And then there's also your general audience research. So how do people you're targeting, how do they communicate on their own in different, let's say, online communities like LinkedIn groups or Facebook groups and so on? How do they talk amongst themselves? What jargon they use? What's the language style? So what we're trying to do here is to understand our audience and make sure that we fit in the best way possible.
I was going to say, do you think a lot of people actually take that time to really listen? Like, what kind of jargon are they using? What kind of I'm wondering if like bigger brands really take that time to do that.
Well, I do feel that brands that are doing brand voice right, they do take the time to do that. Obviously not everyone has the time to do that, and this is not something that keeps happening all throughout the life of an organization. Usually whenever you first decide to focus on defining a specific brand voice and to focus on that aspect of your brand, you will go through this research in more depth, and from then on you do a refresh of that, and you need to do some additional research on that front on a in a cyclical manner, so to say. So in a regular period of time, but it's not something that you need to keep dedicating time to on a daily basis. And I feel that as long as you can, as long as you're willing to focus on brand voice and on that side of brand development, you really need to do your homework, as it were.
Yeah. So is there a difference between like a brand voice and the tone? I think you kind of touched on this, but.
Yes. So the way you can think about it is that a brand voice is much closer to your overall personality as a brand. So this is your general style of communication, your general look at the world, even, or even sometimes like the brand voice would be very tightly connected to the brand values that you have as a company, as a business, as a whole. While tone of voice, that's an element that's more malleable, that can change depending on a different situation. So the easiest example I can give, you have your standard voice that you're keeping consistently throughout different channels, but you won't necessarily use the same tone if you're showing an error message on your website compared to when you're promoting a new promo campaign that you have on social media, let's say. So that voice will change a bit depending on the situation. It's just the same as if we think about a person. You can talk about a person's own personal characteristics, which are more or less stable throughout time, but then you wouldn't expect that person will talk to a file clerk in the municipality the same way they talk to their son or daughter, So that's the change of tone of voice. The mannerisms are the same, the general style of the person, the way they conduct themselves, that's the same, but there's still slight variations depending on the context.
That's a good example, good explanation. So again, we're talking about finding your brand voice with Vassilena Valchanova. So if you have any questions for her about brand voice or tone, that's what we're chatting about today. Go ahead and drop us a question in the comments. So here's a good one. Can a brand voice change? Should it be, you talked a little about this, should it be audited every so often, or something that sort of stands the test of time?
So the guidelines here would be pretty much the same, like the ones you would have around buyer personas or really any component of your overall marketing strategy. So the ideal way of going about it is to do a refresh, or at least to check if there needs to be an uplift of your brand voice every 6 to 12 months or so. But there are some situations where you'd want to do that more proactively. So for example, if you're launching a new product that's catering to a whole new type of audience, you'd want to focus on like, how do we adapt our brand voice? So how do we change the tone to fit that specific audience? Or if you have a particular service that has been serving a type of people up till now, and then you're seeing a new segment coming in that's also taking interest into that service, you might want to adapt your voice a bit or change the tone for that specific audience. So there are situations where you'd want to go and proactively change that, not just because there's been some time since your last refresh, but because there's something fundamentally changing about the products or solutions you're offering or the audience you're communicating with.
Rebecca here has a question. What is the most efficient way of understanding the lingo and the jargon of your ideal client? She's talking about coaches or consultants.
So the way I personally approach this is to try to immerse myself, at least for a couple of days, as fully as possible within that target group that we're going to be talking to. So, for example, I often currently, as an independent consultant, I often come into a situation where I wouldn't know the details about the audience of my customer, and I need to make sure that I understand that audience before I can propose a specific strategy shift or change in tone or voice, for example. So what I would try to do is go to the places where the ideal target customer of the business resides in. So I'm gonna check Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups, or let's say subreddits where those people gather, and just go through the conversation. It's almost the same as like if you're trying to target football fans or soccer fans to keep that currently, because that's a very specific thing that we're currently having with the current soccer tournaments. So if I want to target soccer fans, I'll go into a sports club pub and just spend an evening there quietly sipping a pint and watching how people interact among themselves. So it's kind of similar to like ethnographic research, where you're just gonna observe and learn about that. Then the other place where I find a lot of valuable information is if I know what media, what specific websites or blogs or even like traditional media like print publications or TV stations the ideal customer is following. I'm gonna spend the day reading or listening or watching those shows and try to understand like what's the appeal there, what's the style of communication there. So you're gonna get these little bits and pieces by trying to act as much as possible as your ideal customer, so to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, going to the pub to get a pint, that sounds like a great way to work. A great way. I'm on board for that one.
Well, it might be the fact that it's currently 7 p.m. over here, and that's where my mind is. So with you, it might be different.
Well, thank you so much, Vassilena, for joining us. How can people reach you? What's the best way or for them to see more about you?
So the best way would be to check out my website. It's my family name, so Valchanova, which is VALCHANOVA.me. Yeah, we see that currently on the screen. Thank you for that. That will make it much more easy. And over there, you're gonna find a lot about my writing. I try to publish at least 2 pretty dense blog posts a month that cover some of the current topics that I'm focusing on in my work. And there is a blog post about brand voice. So if you just jump on in the search bar and search for brand voice, you're gonna find out this article that I wrote a while back. And it sort of was the reason why we came to this conversation today with CMI. And you're gonna find a lot of useful exercises you can use to sort of define that brand voice. As I mentioned earlier, it's not only the job of the marketing team, and having those exercises done by a larger group of people within the company who have different viewpoints. For example, C-suite execs all the way to people on the customer service side who know how people naturally engage and interact. That can be a very useful way to define brand voice and to make sure you codify that in a way that's going to be actionable in the long run.
Great. I heard you have a great, template on your website. So go check it out. The link here is below. Thank you again so much for joining us. Thank you for everyone who left their comments, said hello, asked their questions. And as always, we will see you back here next Monday at noon. Until then, we will see you. Goodbye, Vassie.
Bye.